The inspector. The inspector is the individual who genuinely examines the instruction guide multiple times. They're sensible, stable, and repulsed by disorder. If existence were a collective assignment, they're the one establishing the organizational system while everyone else is still comprehending what the task even involves. They appreciate structure, regulations, frameworks, patterns. To an inspector, consistency isn't tedious, it's liberation. They recognize where things are positioned, how mechanisms operate, and what occurs if you take shortcuts because they've already verified 3 times. These are the individuals who stabilize the finances, repair the equipment, and arrive punctually even when the invitation was unclear. But it's not simply about regulations. At their foundation, inspectors are devoted. If they commit to something, an occupation, a companion, a pledge, they execute through even when it's troublesome. Some label them inflexible, but inspectors would label it trustworthy. The disadvantage: they can struggle when the universe refuses to operate by the regulations they appreciate so intensely. Abrupt transformation, final-minute improvisation, that's their terror. But provide them a strategy, a procedure, and some tranquility and silence, and they'll quietly maintain the universe rotating while everyone else is alarming. The campaigner. The campaigner is essentially human stimulation. Enter a space, and suddenly the atmosphere is more intense, the wit is more rapid, and you're somehow consenting to proceed on a journey at 2 in the morning with individuals you just encountered. These are the individuals who address rest as more of a recommendation than a requirement. They're concept generators, perpetually brainstorming, perpetually initiating undertakings. Completing them, well, that's discretionary. A campaigner's digital storage is a cemetery of discontinued side enterprises, half-composed literature, and commercial proposals that sounded magnificent at 3 in the morning. But here's the reality: you can't remain frustrated at them. They're captivating, contagious. They generate you believe that affirmative, you should resign your occupation, relocate to tropical locations, and initiate a fermented beverage empire. And even if it collapses and combusts, you'll at minimum have an excellent narrative. The opposite aspect: disorder. The nurturer. The nurturer is the individual who recalls your birth date, your canine's designation, and that peculiar narrative you communicated to them 3 years prior about getting imprisoned in an elevator. They're devoted, observant, and perpetually monitoring out for the individuals they care about. In a collective, they're the silent foundation. Not the most vocal, not the most ostentatious, but the one you can genuinely depend on. They flourish on accountability. If something requires to be accomplished, they'll accept it, even if it means remaining conscious late to complete the occupation no one else desired. Some individuals label them altruistic, others label them individuals gratifiers. The reality is somewhere in between. They desire accord, they desire others to feel secure. But sometimes, that means they forget about their own requirements. The disadvantage: they can deplete out from providing excessively, but when balanced, nurturers are the steady cardiac rhythm of any family, collective, or companionship circle, quietly containing everything together while the universe rotates. The mastermind. The mastermind doesn't simply participate in the game, they're 3 maneuvers ahead, already strategizing how to succeed. Strategic, confidential, persistent. They exist in their own mental conflict chamber, perpetually operating scenarios. While others respond, they compute. They desire improvement, exactness, and authority. To a mastermind, flawlessness isn't discretionary, it's anticipated. They're not interested in trivial communication or sweetening coding. They desire frameworks, reasoning, outcomes. That power can generate them feel frigid, even intimidating. But underneath is a propulsion to construct something enduring, something that genuinely operates. The peril? They can separate themselves, persuaded no one else can maintain up. They might dismiss feelings as weakness, forgetting that not everything can be resolved with a blueprint. But when a mastermind discovers balance, combining their ruthless perception with patience and humanity, they don't simply succeed, they transform entire universes. The virtuoso. The virtuoso is the individual who observes a secured entrance and immediately thinks, "I question if I can manipulate that." They're practical, spontaneous, and repulsed by tedium. If there's a difficulty, they'll disassemble it, interfere with it, and probably repair it, or at minimum fracture it in a more fascinating method. They exist for the instant. Strategizing schedules, that's confinement. A virtuoso desires to submerge headfirst into action, whether it's constructing something in their workspace, reserving a journey on an impulse, or persuading their companions to attempt precipice plunging at 2 in the morning. The complication? Commitment is not their powerful characteristic. They can be unreliable, agitated, and repulsed by anything that feels repetitive. But the advantage is that existence with a virtuoso is never boring. They deliver vitality, hazard, and a little bit of disorder. And sometimes that's precisely what a stagnant universe requires. The artist. The artist shifts through the universe like existence itself is a surface, silent, mild, and profoundly responsive. They observe magnificence where others observe nothing. A fracture in the pavement, a melody half heard, the method sunlight penetrates through dusty screens. It all carries significance. They exist in the instant, pursuing their feelings like a navigation instrument. To them, regulations are recommendations, and conformity feels like asphyxiation. They'd rather create outside the boundaries, literally or metaphorically, than advance to someone else's rhythm. That liberation generates them innovative, compassionate, and capricious. But it's not always effortless being this attuned. Their feelings can oscillate intensely, abandoning them vulnerable to self-uncertainty or extracting away when the universe feels too acute. Still, when they access up, they deliver hue to everyone around, transforming ordinary days into something quietly exceptional. The mediator. The mediator exists with one extremity in perception and the other in a universe only they can observe. They're fantasizers, idealists, and silent warriors for what feels genuine and significant. To them, existence isn't about ascending ladders or pursuing trophies. It's about remaining bonded to purpose, to principles, to the things that generate your spirit feel present. They're compassionate to a fault, perpetually observing the beneficial in individuals, even when it's concealed profound. But that kindness can also imprison them. They'll forgive excessively, remain excessively long, or forfeit themselves in someone else's narrative. Their inner universe is vivid and abundant, but it can generate the outside universe feel burdensome, even hostile. Still, when they transmit that imagination into action, mediators inspire transformation. They remind us that the most silent voices frequently carry the most profound realities. The thinker. The thinker is the juvenile who disassembled the heating device simply to observe how it operated. Analytical, inquisitive, and marginally repulsed by trivial communication, they invest more time in their consciousness than anywhere else. For them, the universe is one enormous challenge, and every question is another fragment waiting to be resolved. They flourish on hypothesis, not what is, but what could be. They'll happily dispute abstract concepts for hours, then forget to consume nutrition because they received absorbed in cognition. On the positive aspect, they're inventive and original. On the negative aspect, don't anticipate them to recall where they positioned their access devices. The thinker's weakness, they can receive so enveloped in notions that perception feels like an afterthought. But when they balance their endless inquisitiveness with sufficient practicality, they're the ones who reconstruct the regulations the remainder of us exist by. The dynamo. The dynamo is pure stimulation in human form. These are the individuals who address velocity restrictions as recommendations, and think accountability is simply an amusing term adults generated up. If something appears hazardous, they're already halfway through accomplishing it before anyone else has completed declaring harmful concept. They exist for the excitement. Rapid vehicles, substantial wagers, final minute determinations. To them, the secure option is the tedious option. They're magnetic, reckless, and somehow perpetually have a narrative that initiates with, "So there I was," and terminates with, "And that's how I concluded up in the crisis facility." But beneath the disorder, dynamos are difficulty resolvers. Position them in a crisis, and they'll discover a method out while everyone else is alarming. The difficulty, consistency, feels like a mechanism. They're perpetually pursuing the subsequent elevation. Still, when the universe requires someone bold enough to leap first, the dynamo is already in the atmosphere. The performer. The performer was essentially born with an illumination overhead. They ambulate into a space and immediately become the primary character, whether they strategized it or not. Vocal, enjoyable, and effortlessly magnetic, they flourish on attention, the method. Vegetation flourish on sunlight. These are the companions who will persuade you to proceed out on a weekday, invest excessive currency, and terminate up moving on furniture, and somehow generate you feel like it was the superior determination of your existence. They're entertainers, captivators, natural emotional state elevators. But here's the complication. The festivity never persists forever. When the music ceases, performers can struggle with the quietness. They despise tedium, circumvent accountability, and sometimes conceal insecurity with charisma. Still, when they're balanced, they remind everyone around them that existence isn't meant to be tolerated. It's meant to be appreciated. The debater. The debater doesn't dispute because they're furious. They dispute because it's enjoyable. For them, every exchange is a battlefield, and every perspective is an invitation to compete. They'll transition aspects mid-dispute simply to observe if they can still succeed. They're rapid, clever, and endlessly inquisitive. Regulations, boundaries, sacred concepts, all acceptable game to penetrate openings in. They flourish in disorder, in brainstorming, in proposing concepts that generate everyone else cease and declare, pause. Could that genuinely operate? The disadvantage, subtlety, is not their specialty. They can overwhelm individuals without recognizing it, transforming disputes into demolition. But when a debater discovers to utilize that vitality for innovation instead of simply provocation, they're not simply entertaining, they're unstoppable. The executive. The executive is structure incarnate, organized, determined, and commanding. They're the ones who generate sure things receive accomplished, whether individuals appreciate it or not. In their universe, there's a correct method to accomplish things, and squandering time isn't on the list. They're natural organizers, the type who can ambulate into disorder and abandon behind an operating framework. To them, efficiency isn't discretionary, it's sacred. That propulsion generates them trustworthy leaders, the type who can maintain a collective on track when everything else is collapsing apart. But power arrives with shadows. Executives can be inflexible, dismissive of nuance, and impatient with anyone who doesn't maintain up. They hazard becoming so concentrated on regulations and outcomes that they forget about individuals. Yet, when they strike the balance, executives don't simply sustain structure, they construct frameworks that persist. The provider. The provider is the companion who recalls to deliver snacks, verifies if you reached residence secure, and somehow manages to organize the collective communication disorder into an actual strategy. They exist for bonding, for generating sure the individuals around them feel cared for. To them, kindness isn't simply pleasant, it's necessary. They're generous with their time, their vitality, and their attention. Providers desire accord, and they'll proceed out of their method to smooth over conflict before it even initiates. But that identical generosity can be a mechanism. They can become so concentrated on assisting others that they forget their own requirements. Still, at their superior, providers are the adhesive in any community. They maintain relationships powerful, generate traditions matter, and remind everyone what it feels like to belong. The protagonist. The protagonist ambulates into a space, and individuals notice, not because they're vocal, but because they carry purpose, like an illumination. Charismatic, persuasive, and propelled. They observe potential in individuals before those individuals even observe it in themselves. They flourish on leadership, not for the authority, but for the opportunity to guide others towards something more substantial. Protagonists believe in causes, in missions, in the possibility of transforming the universe. That passion is magnetic, inspiring others to pursue them, even when the path isn't transparent. The hazard, they can deplete themselves out attempting to rescue everyone. They may propel excessively intensely, persuaded they recognize what's superior. But when their passion is combined with humility, protagonists become the type of leaders who don't simply communicate about transformation, they generate it occur. The commander. The commander doesn't inquire if something can be accomplished. They inquire who's proceeding to accomplish it and when it'll be completed. Bold, determined, and persistent. They're natural leaders who flourish in competition. To them, obstacles are simply challenges waiting to be resolved, preferably more rapidly than anyone else. They observe inefficiency as the adversary, and they'll demolish through excuses without a second cognition. That generates them powerful, but also intimidating. Commanders can appear as ruthless, propelling individuals more intensely than they propel themselves, which is declaring something. But here's the reality. They don't propel individuals out of cruelty. They accomplish it because they observe potential and won't accept less than excellence. When tempered with compassion, commanders aren't simply leaders. They're visionaries who receive outcomes others only fantasize about. The advocate. The advocate is uncommon, silent, but intense. They carry profundity like a secret, observing designs and realities most individuals overlook. While others examine the surface, advocates submerge into significance, searching for purpose in everything they accomplish. They're compassionate but not naive, kind but not weak. When they care about something, it isn't casual, it's consuming. They'll sacrifice ease, time, even relationships to remain genuine to their perception of what's correct. That integrity is powerful, but it can also be separating because advocates frequently feel like outsiders, misunderstood even by individuals proximate to them. But when they discover their voice, they don't simply communicate, they shift individuals. They're the silent revolutionaries. The visionaries who transform the universe not by force, but by the sheer gravity of their conviction.